The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Chapter 13. In all the excitement of the rescue, Esmeralda had fainted. When she awoke, she was confused. She remembered a struggle. Then she seemed to be swinging through the air. Was she dead, she wondered? Had the angels carried her away to heaven? She sat up with a start. She had been lying on a straw bed in a large stone room. A single torch on an iron stand burned brightly. Then Esmeralda saw a shadow fall over her. She knew she was not alone. Esmeralda turned. She was face to face with the monster who had saved her. Quasimodo crouched in the corner near the torch. His twisted face tried to smile at her. Esmeralda was afraid, but she smiled back. "It was you who saved me," she said. Quasimodo turned his head and watched her lips. Esmeralda looked back at him, puzzled. The hunchback put one hand against his ear. "I am deaf," he muttered. "The bells have taken my hearing." He felt ashamed of his handicap and his ugliness. He turned his face away from her. "You don't have to look at me," he said. But, for the first time, Esmeralda could see the truth. She could see that under his deformed flesh, Quasimodo was good and gentle. He was no monster. Esmeralda rose from the straw bed. Slowly she walked over to the hunchback. He covered his face with his hands. But Esmeralda reached out and touched his arms gently. Then she pulled his hands down and looked him in the eye. "Only the blind could think you ugly," she said. "I can see your soul is noble." Quasimodo could not hear her words, but he understood. He lowered his arms and looked at the beautiful girl. He remembered the question he wanted to ask her. "Are you hungry?" he asked. "I have bread and soup." Esmeralda smiled. "Oh, yes," she said. Quasimodo hurried out of the room. He quickly returned with a large bowl of hot soup. He carried 2 long loaves of bread, too. He laid the food down at Esmeralda's feet. She sat on the floor and began to eat. As she ate, Quasimodo talked to her. He told her about Notre Dame and about his lonely life in the bell tower. While the hunchback was busy seizing Esmeralda, I was busy too. I rushed to the top of the scaffold, but I arrived too late to stop Quasimodo from taking Esmeralda. I had some luck, though. I did manage to rescue poor Jolly. I carried the goat from the square in my arms. Jolly remembered me and was happy to see me. We sneaked past the guards and went home. Back at the Court of Miracles, the king called a meeting of all the beggars. "We must do something to rescue Esmeralda," the king declared. The beggars cheered. "But she is safe from the soldiers," I argued. "She has sanctuary in the church." "But remember, Pierre," the king said, "the archdeacon was the one who had her arrested. He also lives in Notre Dame." My heart sank. The king was right. Esmeralda was safe from the soldiers of France. She was with Quasimodo. But she was also in the lair of the man who wanted her dead. "Yes, we must do something," I cried. "We will. I have a plan," the king replied. "It is dangerous, but it will work." After Esmeralda ate her meal, Quasimodo took her to see his tower. He showed her the bells of the church. Esmeralda was surprised to see how large some of them were. There were many smaller bells all around, but in the center of the tower were the big bells. Those bells were larger than she was. "I have rung these bells since I was a child," Quasimodo told her. "They have ruined my ears, but I love them." Quasimodo was proud of his bells. He jumped on the largest one and rocked it back and forth. Soon the bell began to ring. The sound was very loud. Esmeralda covered her ears. Quasimodo laughed and laughed. He swung back and forth. He jumped from bell to bell. Soon, all the bells were ringing. People ran out into the streets and looked up at the bell tower. The bells had not rung like this since the cathedral was built. Everyone in Paris could hear them, and the sound was full of joy. Then the hunchback took Esmeralda out onto the balcony. The balcony was very high. At one end, a stone gargoyle as large as Quasimodo himself stood on the edge of the balcony. It stared with stony eyes. "This is my friend," he told her. "He cannot speak, and I cannot hear." He patted the statue on its head. Then they both looked down on the city streets below. Esmeralda was suddenly very sad. "My whole life is down there," she thought. "Will I ever see the court of miracles again? Or Pierre? Or little Jolly?" Quasimodo watched her as she wondered about her fate. As if reading her thoughts, Quasimodo spoke. "You must never leave this tower," he said. "If you do, the soldiers will get you. Here you have sanctuary. Down there you will die." Esmeralda began to cry. "Do not worry," Quasimodo said. "I will always be here to protect you." But Esmeralda could not stop crying. Quasimodo was sad to see the gypsy girl cry. He knew she missed her friends. He tried to help as best he could. "I will always be here," Quasimodo promised her. "You will not be lonely. I will bring you food and drink." When she did not look at him, Quasimodo reached into his shirt. He pulled out a long wooden whistle. "Please take this," he told Esmeralda. "I can hear the whistle only if it is blown. If it is the only sound I can hear, if you are in any danger, use it. I will come." He placed the whistle in her small hand. Her fingers closed on it. Then Esmeralda turned to Quasimodo. She gazed into his eye. Ashamed, the hunchback turned away. "I know you love someone else," he said sadly. Then he put his hand on the gargoyle. "You look at me with pity because I am ugly," Quasimodo said. "Would you love me if I were not a man? Would you love me if I were a goat or were a statue made of stone?" Esmeralda did not answer. Quasimodo sighed. "If that were so," he said, "I wish I were made of stone." With those words, Quasimodo also ran from the balcony. Esmeralda watched him leave. Alone, she gazed down at the city below. A tear fell from her eye. "Quasimodo is my only friend now, she thought, "and I shall live in this tower forever." She held the whistle close to her breast. Then Esmeralda started to cry.
I finish?